Title: The Biggest Misconception in Physics. Part 1. The Secret Lab, Expanded. Part 1. The Discovery. Dr. Maya Thomas had always been captivated by the universe's most profound mysteries. As a child, she would lie on her back and stare at the stars, pondering the vastness of the cosmos and the forces that governed it. By the time she reached university, her childhood wonder had blossomed into an obsession. Maya was no longer satisfied with simply marveling at the universe. She wanted to understand its deepest truths. Her dream was to become one of the leading physicists of her generation and unlock the secrets of time, space, and matter. Her office at the university was a small, cluttered room filled with textbooks on quantum mechanics, general relativity, and string theory. But it was the old, weathered manuscript she'd found in the university's forgotten library that had caught her attention. The book, bound in cracked leather, was nearly unreadable. The ink had faded in some places, but Maya had been able to make out enough of the writing to be intrigued. The manuscript contained a radical theory that contradicted everything she had been taught in her years of study. The author proposed that time, far from being a constant force, was a variable, a flexible dimension that interacted with space in ways no physicist had ever considered. Time wasn't a linear progression, like the arrow of a clock. It could bend, stretch, and shift. This idea was shocking, almost heretical. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there was something profound in those pages. She spent sleepless nights poring over the manuscript, cross-referencing it with her own research. The more she studied, the more she began to see patterns in her experiments that didn't fit with conventional theories. Her work in quantum mechanics, which involved analyzing the behavior of subatomic particles, had shown strange anomalies, results that defied expectations. The particles seemed to move in ways that were not consistent with a linear progression of time. Could it be possible? Could time actually behave differently than the textbooks told her? Maya's heart raced with the possibility. If this manuscript was right, everything she knew about the universe could be wrong. The implications were staggering. Time wasn't a force to be obeyed. It could be shaped, manipulated. The fabric of reality itself could be more malleable than anyone had ever dreamed. But she couldn't do it alone. Maya needed someone who would understand, someone with the expertise to help her test her theory. Dr. Richard Evans, the university's senior professor of theoretical physics, was the first person she thought of. Richard was a respected scientist, but his reputation was built on more conventional ideas. He had always been skeptical of out-of-the-box theories. Still, Maya trusted him. She knew that if anyone could help her explore this uncharted territory, it would be him. The next day, she walked into his office, her pulse quickening as she approached his desk. Richard looked up from his papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. Maya wasted no time. "Richard, I found something," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "I think we've all been wrong about time. I think it's not a constant." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "What are you talking about, Maya?" She set the manuscript on his desk, pointing to the faded pages. "This manuscript, it suggests that time is a variable, not linear, and my recent experiments show anomalies that align with this. I think time is flexible. It can bend and warp." Richard hesitated, glancing over the manuscript. "You're proposing that everything we know about time is wrong? That it's not a steady, forward-moving force?" "Yes," Maya said, her voice firm with conviction. "I think time interacts with space and the quantum field in ways we've never considered." Richard sat back in his chair, deep in thought. This could be revolutionary. But it's also dangerous. We'd be challenging centuries of established physics. If you're right, Maya, we'd have to rethink everything. "I know," Maya replied, her voice tinged with excitement. "But think of what it could mean. We could unlock a new understanding of the universe. Time could be manipulated, controlled." Richard sighed, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "All right, let's see where this takes us. But we'll have to be careful. The consequences of testing something this radical could be catastrophic." Maya nodded. "I understand. But this is the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Part 2, the plan. Maya and Richard threw themselves into their work with renewed determination. They knew they were embarking on uncharted territory, and the risks were immense, but the allure of discovery was too powerful to resist. Their goal was to create a machine that could measure time's fluctuations at the quantum level. If they could capture even the smallest shifts in time, they would have undeniable proof that time was not a constant force. The machine, which they dubbed the Quantum Time Oscillator, would require state-of-the-art technology, particle accelerators, quantum field sensors, and the latest in computing power. The university had some of the most advanced equipment available, and Maya used every resource at her disposal to design the machine. It was a delicate process. One wrong calculation could destroy the entire project. One mistake could have catastrophic consequences. Yet, with every hour spent refining the design, Maya's confidence grew. They were on the verge of something extraordinary. As they worked, Maya couldn't help but feel a growing sense of urgency. She knew that once they activated the quantum time oscillator, there would be no turning back. There would be no way of predicting what would happen. The consequences could be as magnificent as they were terrifying. Time itself might unravel before them. Richard, ever the cautious one, was more reserved. He kept pushing for more safety measures, double-checking every calculation and testing every component. He didn't share Maya's eagerness, but he respected her brilliance. He could see the potential in her work, even if he wasn't entirely convinced it would work. Maya, Richard said one evening as they reviewed the final design, this could be a game changer, but we have to be prepared for the worst. What if this machine doesn't just observe time, but alters it? What if it opens up a doorway we can't close? Maya looked up from her notes, meeting his gaze. That's the risk we have to take. But think of what we could discover. If we're right, we could unlock the secrets of the universe. I know, Richard said, but we can't forget that if we're wrong, we could be altering the very fabric of reality itself. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had thought about that possibility, but she hadn't allowed herself to fully consider the implications. They were about to do something no one had ever attempted. There was no way to predict how the universe would respond. Part 3. The first test. Finally, after months of preparation, the quantum time oscillator was ready for its first test. The machine hummed with energy, its circuits buzzing as Maya and Richard stood before it, both feeling the weight of what they were about to do. The room was filled with tension as they made the final adjustments. Maya's fingers hovered over the control panel. This is it, Richard. Are you ready? Richard swallowed hard, his face pale. As ready as I'll ever be. Maya took a deep breath and pressed the button. The machine roared to life. Particle accelerators fired up, sending subatomic particles speeding through the machine's core. Quantum sensors began to register data at an unprecedented rate. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, the data began to fluctuate wildly, far beyond their expectations. Maya's heart raced as she watched the screen. This isn't right. These readings, they are unlike anything we've seen before. Richard's voice trembled. Maya, what have we done? The lab shook, the machines groaning under the pressure. Sparks flew from the quantum time oscillator as the system began to overload. Maya scrambled to shut it down, but the control panel flickered and went dark. The data continued to pulse, spiraling out of control. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash, and the world around them seemed to warp. Time itself seemed to bend. The air vibrated, and the floor beneath them cracked. Everything went silent. Then, darkness. Part 4. The shift. When Maya regained consciousness, she felt as if she were waking from a long, deep sleep. Her head throbbed, and her vision blurred as she slowly pushed herself up from the cold floor of the lab. The familiar hum of the quantum time oscillator was gone. Instead, there was an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. Her eyes darted around the room. Everything looked the same, but there was something off. The machinery, though intact, was no longer powered on. The control panels were dark, and the humming energy that had once filled the lab was completely absent. She checked her watch, her pulse quickened. The time was wrong. It was several hours later than it should have been. Maya! Richard's voice called out weakly from behind her. She turned to see him sitting up, rubbing his head as if to clear the fog from his mind. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was silence between them. His face was pale, and his expression was clouded with confusion. What happened? He muttered. I don't know, Maya answered, her voice shaking. I pushed the button to activate the machine, and then everything went wrong. As Richard stood up, his face turned even graver. It's worse than that, Maya. It's not just the machine. Something has changed. He pointed to the window, and Maya followed his gaze. Outside, the cityscape looked different. The buildings, though familiar, seemed to have aged. Their sharp, modern lines were now softened by the passage of time. The world beyond the lab was no longer the one they knew. Is this our reality? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think so, Richard said, moving toward the window to inspect the streets below. I think we've shifted into a different timeline, or an alternate reality. Somehow, we've altered more than just time. Maya's heart sank as she walked over to join him. Everything was different. The trees outside had a strange, unnatural color. The people walking along the street looked like strangers, their clothes outdated, as if they were stuck in a different era. The sky had a faint, hazy quality to it that made it seem wrong. How could this happen? Maya whispered. We were just trying to measure time. How could we have caused this? Richard shook his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. I don't know. But this is what happens when you tamper with something so fundamental. We didn't just observe time, Maya. We interfered with it. Maya turned back to the quantum time oscillator, which was now eerily still. The machine had been their key to unlocking the secrets of the universe, but now it seemed to have opened a door to something far darker, something beyond their control. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed from the door to the lab. Both Maya and Richard froze, their bodies tensing instinctively. The world outside had changed, but what if the world inside had, too? Who could be standing there? Maya approached the door cautiously, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. She hesitated before opening it, bracing herself for whatever might be on the other side. When she swung the door open, she was met with a stranger, a tall man in a faded, tattered suit, his face obscured by the shadows of the hallway. He looked almost out of place, as if he didn't belong in this reality. His eyes were dark, hollow, and his presence sent a chill down Maya's spine. Dr. Maya Thomas, he asked, his voice low and measured. Maya swallowed hard, her mind racing. Yes? Who are you? The man stepped forward, his eyes scanning the lab before meeting hers once more. You've been waiting for me, he said cryptically. I've come to help you fix this. Part 5, The Return. Maya's pulse quickened as the man stepped inside. His presence felt foreign, as if he didn't belong in this world. She could feel Richard's eyes on her, a silent warning flashing between them. Who was this man? And how did he know who they were? You must come with me, the man continued, his voice steady but urgent. The timeline you disturbed is unstable. If you don't fix it, everything will collapse. Maya's mind raced. But, we didn't mean to do this, she said, her voice shaking. We just wanted to understand time. He nodded gravely. Understanding time isn't a luxury that can be afforded. You have tampered with forces beyond your comprehension. If you don't correct this, the fabric of the multiverse itself will tear apart. Richard stepped forward, his brow furrowed in skepticism. Who are you? And how do you know what we've done? The man glanced at Richard before answering, his voice softening. I'm someone who's seen the consequences of meddling with time. I've traveled across realities, seen what happens when the fabric is stretched too far. You must come with me, now. I can show you how to reset the timeline. Maya exchanged a look with Richard. It felt like they were standing on the edge of a precipice. They had already altered the course of time once. Could they really trust this stranger to guide them back? Maya took a deep breath. We don't have a choice, do we? The man shook his head. No. The more time you spend in this reality, the more irreversible the damage will be. Reluctantly, Maya nodded, and Richard followed her lead. The man turned and motioned for them to follow. As they walked out of the lab and into the hallway, Maya couldn't help but feel a strange sense of finality. What if they couldn't return to the world they knew? What if this was the last time they'd ever see their reality again? They followed the man through the university's abandoned corridors, which seemed to stretch endlessly. Every turn, every corner was unfamiliar, and the strange, hollow feeling of the new world gnawed at Maya's insides. Nothing felt right. Finally, they arrived at a door, one that led to a small, dimly lit room. The man gestured for them to enter. This is where it all started, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Inside, Maya saw a large, strange device, an updated version of the quantum time oscillator. But this one was more advanced, more complex, and it hummed with an energy she could barely comprehend. This is the key to resetting the timeline, the man explained. You need to power it up and reverse the process you set in motion. Maya's heart raced as she approached the machine, her mind racing with uncertainty. She didn't fully understand how the machine worked, but she knew they had no other option. If they didn't try to fix what they had broken, the world they had known would be lost forever. With Richard's help, Maya began to power up the machine. The humming energy intensified, and she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Would it work? Would they be able to return to their reality? Or had they already crossed a point of no return? As the machine powered up, a strange glow enveloped the room, and Maya felt herself pulled into the vortex of energy. The world around her began to spin and warp, the fabric of reality itself seeming to unravel. She held her breath, praying that they could return home. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the spinning stopped. The glow faded. The room was silent again. Maya opened her eyes. They were back. But was it truly their world? Had they fixed the timeline? Or had they simply jumped to another reality? As she looked around the familiar lab, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Time had shifted, yes, but in doing so, it had created ripples that even they couldn't fully understand. Welcome home, the man said, his voice echoing in the silence. But Maya wasn't so sure. The universe they had returned to might look the same, but everything had changed. Would they ever truly understand the power of time? Or would they always be haunted by the consequences of their actions? The journey was far from over.